Switzerland looks simple from the outside: mountains, banks, watches, chocolate, ski resorts, and quiet cities where everything seems to run on time. But behind that familiar image is one of the strangest political success stories in modern Europe. Switzerland is small, landlocked, multilingual, heavily armed, famously neutral, deeply democratic, and extremely wealthy. It sits at the meeting point of Central, Western, and Southern Europe, surrounded by Germany, France, Italy, Austria, and Liechtenstein. That geography could have made it a battlefield or a divided borderland. Instead, Switzerland turned its position into an advantage. Its history is not the story of one dominant language, one royal dynasty, or one ethnic group building a centralized state. It is the story of communities choosing to cooperate, defend themselves, and preserve local autonomy while still building a shared national identity. That is what makes Switzerland so unusual. It is less a nation held together by sameness than a country held together by agreement. Geography is the first key to understanding Switzerland. The country is divided into three major physical regions: the Alps, the Swiss Plateau, and the Jura Mountains. The Alps cover much of the territory and dominate the image of Switzerland, but they are not where most Swiss people live. The majority of the population is concentrated on the Swiss Plateau, a more accessible belt of land where major cities and economic centers developed. Zurich, Geneva, Basel, Bern, Lausanne, Winterthur, and Lucerne all sit within this broader pattern of settlement and connection. The mountains mattered because they created natural barriers, protected local communities, and made invasion difficult. But the plateau mattered because it allowed trade, agriculture, industry, finance, and administration to flourish. Switzerland's success came from combining both worlds, the defensive strength and symbolism of the Alps with the practical economic life of the cities and valleys below. Switzerland's political structure also reflects its geography. It is a federal republic made up of 26 cantons, and those cantons are not just decorative regions on a map. They are central to how the country works. Swiss federalism means that power is deliberately spread out, with local and cantonal governments retaining major responsibilities. Bern serves as the federal city and the seat of the national government, but Switzerland was never designed as a country where everything flows from one giant capital. This is important because the Swiss state grew from alliances among self-governing communities, not from a king conquering territory and imposing uniform rule. The result is a political culture that strongly values compromise, local control, and suspicion of excessive central authority. In many countries, diversity creates pressure for centralization. In Switzerland, diversity helped create a system where decentralization became the solution. One of Switzerland's most remarkable features is that it has four principal linguistic and cultural regions: German, French, Italian, and Romansh. In many parts of Europe, language differences became the foundation for separatism or conflict. Switzerland took a different path. Swiss identity does not depend on everyone speaking the same language or belonging to the same ethnic background. Instead, the country is often described with the German term Willensnation, meaning a nation of will or a nation of volition. In other words, it exists because its people choose to share a political framework. This does not mean Switzerland has no tensions. Cultural and religious divisions have mattered throughout its history. But the national idea is built around cooperation across difference. The Swiss flag, the Alps, neutrality, federalism, direct democracy, and civic responsibility became stronger symbols than language alone. The origins of Switzerland go back to the old Swiss Confederacy in the late Middle Ages. It began as a defensive and commercial alliance among communities that wanted to protect their rights, routes, and autonomy. The Federal Charter of 1291 is traditionally considered the founding document, even though the Swiss state evolved gradually over centuries. This early confederation expanded and consolidated through a mixture of military resistance, diplomacy, and practical cooperation. It faced outside threats, internal disputes, religious division, and political rivalry, yet it survived. In 1648, the Peace of Westphalia formally recognized Swiss independence from the Holy Roman Empire. That recognition mattered because it confirmed what had already become increasingly true in practice. The Swiss Confederacy was no longer simply a cluster of territories inside a larger imperial system. It had become a distinct political entity with its own path. Switzerland's survival is especially striking when compared with the rest of Europe. For centuries, Europe was dominated by monarchies, empires, dynastic wars, and shifting borders. The Swiss Confederacy was among the few republican systems to endure in the early modern period. But it was not untouched by upheaval. In 1798, revolutionary France invaded and imposed the Helvetic Republic, a centralized state modeled more closely on French revolutionary ideas. This was a dramatic break from Switzerland's old decentralized structure, and it did not last. Napoleon abolished the Helvetic Republic in 1803 and restored a confederal arrangement. After the Napoleonic Wars, Switzerland returned to much of its older system, but liberal and conservative tensions continued to grow. The question became unavoidable: could Switzerland remain a loose collection of self-governing states, or did it need a stronger federal structure to survive modern politics? The answer came in 1848, when Switzerland adopted a new constitution that established the basis of the modern federal state. This was one of the most important turning points in Swiss history. The new system balanced unity with autonomy. It created stronger national institutions while preserving the role of the cantons. It also enshrined principles such as individual rights, separation of powers, and parliamentary bicameralism. In practice, this meant Switzerland could become more coherent as a country without erasing the local identities that made it work. The 1848 Constitution helped turn an old confederation into a modern federal republic. It also made Switzerland unusual in a Europe still filled with monarchies and empires. The country chose institutions, rules, and negotiated balance over dynastic power or revolutionary centralism. Neutrality is probably Switzerland's most famous political idea, but it is often misunderstood. Swiss neutrality is not simply passivity or isolation. It is armed neutrality, backed by the idea that the country should avoid taking part in foreign wars while maintaining the ability to defend itself. Switzerland has maintained a policy of armed neutrality since the 16th century and has not fought an international war since 1815. This position was shaped by geography, internal diversity, and survival strategy. A multilingual country surrounded by major powers had strong reasons not to become a permanent ally of one neighbor against another. Neutrality allowed Switzerland to reduce external pressure and preserve internal balance. But it did not mean Switzerland had no role in world affairs. Over time, neutrality became a platform for diplomacy, mediation, humanitarian work, and hosting international organizations. That diplomatic role is visible in Switzerland's relationship with global institutions. The country is the birthplace of the Red Cross, one of the most important humanitarian organizations in the world. It also hosts headquarters or offices of major international bodies, including the World Trade Organization, the World Health Organization, the International Labour Organization, FIFA, the World Economic Forum, and United Nations offices. Switzerland joined the Council of Europe in 1964 and the United Nations only in 2002, which shows how carefully it has balanced international participation with neutrality. Geneva in particular became a global city not because it ruled an empire, but because it became a trusted meeting place. Switzerland's international role is therefore paradoxical. It is not a great military power, but it has built influence by becoming useful, stable, neutral, and institutionally reliable. Switzerland's economic success is just as important to its global image. It is among the most developed countries in the world, with extremely high wealth per adult and one of the highest levels of GDP per capita. But the Swiss economy is not based on one industry alone. Banking and finance are famous, and the country's financial sector has long shaped its reputation. Yet Switzerland is also powerful in pharmaceuticals, biotechnology, precision engineering, technology, and watchmaking. These industries share a common theme: high value, high skill, and trust. Swiss products and services are often associated with reliability, discretion, accuracy, and quality. Even traditional symbols like chocolate and cheese fit into a broader pattern of turning craftsmanship, branding, and consistency into economic strength. Switzerland's wealth is not accidental, it is built on institutions, education, stability, specialization, and an ability to sell quality to the world. The quality of life in Swiss cities is another part of the story. Zurich, Geneva, and Basel frequently rank among the world's best cities for living standards. They offer safety, infrastructure, public services, international connections, and access to nature. But there is a trade-off: they are also among the most expensive places to live. High wages, strong institutions, and excellent services come with high housing costs, high prices, and intense competition for space. This is a reminder that Switzerland is not a fantasy postcard. Its success creates pressures of its own. A country with limited land, protected landscapes, strong local controls, and global demand naturally becomes expensive. The Swiss model produces stability and prosperity, but it also requires constant management of affordability, immigration, infrastructure, and the relationship between economic openness and local control. Switzerland's relationship with Europe shows the same balancing act. It is not a member of the European Union, but it participates in important parts of the European single market and the Schengen area. It is also a founding member of the European Free Trade Association. This position reflects a deeply Swiss instinct: cooperate where useful, preserve sovereignty where possible, and avoid handing too much authority to a larger political center. That approach can be complicated, because Switzerland is economically tied to its neighbors and cannot simply ignore European rules. But full integration into the European Union has never been an easy fit for a country built around direct democracy, cantonal autonomy, and neutrality. Switzerland's European strategy is therefore neither full separation nor full union. It is a carefully negotiated middle path. So why does Switzerland matter? Not because every country can copy it. Switzerland's model grew from specific geography, history, institutions, and culture. But it offers a powerful example of how a country can turn constraints into strengths. Mountains became protection and identity. Linguistic diversity became federalism rather than fragmentation. Neutrality became diplomacy rather than invisibility. Small size became specialization rather than weakness. Local autonomy became a foundation for national cohesion. Switzerland is not perfect, and its prosperity comes with real tensions, from cost of living to international scrutiny of finance. But its deeper lesson is that nations do not always need to be built on uniformity. Sometimes they can be built on rules, trust, restraint, and the shared decision to keep a difficult system working. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.